Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us for our webinar today. My name is Mathilde and I am the Digital Marketing Analyst at Amity. So for today's webinar, we're joined by Jason Whitehead, CEO and founder of Tritons, and Jennifer Macklin-Rogan, who is the VP of Client Success at Tritons. So Jason and Jen are incredible experts on everything software adoption, so we're especially thrilled to have them present on the topic, empowering CSMs as adoption coaches today. Jen, Jason, how are you doing today?
Great, thank you for having us. We're really excited to be here.
Awesome, we're excited too, thanks. So right before we begin, a couple of housekeeping notes. We will be on Twitter, so feel free to join the conversation using the hashtag CSWebinar and tag us using the handles @GetAmity and @Tritons. Jen and Jason will be answering questions. So in your GoToWebinar side panel, there's a question section on the side. So at any time, feel free to send us your questions in that box, and we'll come back to them at the end for a Q&A. So yeah, but don't hesitate to send the questions at any time. Don't wait until the end, as usual. And last but not least, expect to hear from us soon. We will be sending the recording of the session and the slides as well to everyone before the weekend. So now, before we get started, I just want to take a very short minute of your time to introduce Amity. So we don't usually talk about Amity too much in the webinars, and we won't be talking about Amity in the webinar, but I just want to give everyone a little bit of context and introduce you to who we are, if you don't know who we are. So Amity is a customer success management platform, and we allow CSMs to retain and grow their customers by monitoring health scores, engagements, and more. And the Amity tool can also automate engagements based on smart playbooks and a lot of other things. And we also integrate with pretty much everything out there. So you can see a list on our website of all of the CRMs, billing tools, communication tools, everyone that we work with. And yeah, so if you want more information about what we do, head over to our website and click Request a Demo, and we would love to give you a tour. And that's it about Amity. So on this note, Jen and Jason, thank you so much for being with us today. We're very excited to have you, and yeah, let's get started.
Great, thank you so much. We really appreciate the warm welcome, and we appreciate everyone attending today. Just real quick, a little bit about Tritons. We are a customer success and software adoption consulting training solution provider company. And we work with both software vendors and the buyers of technology, focusing mostly on the organizational side to make sure once an organization has a software system that they're using it and creating value from it so that they're renewing year over year over year. A little bit about my background just to give you some perspective on where I'm coming from and some of the information that you're going to see. Then I'll turn it over to Jen to introduce herself and present her background. I've spent many years working in IT consulting and actually implementing systems, working hands-on throughout the full life cycle process to get them up and running, and spent several years internally at a Fortune 100 company managing and overseeing their global CRM system, where I really had full responsibility for making sure the system worked, but also that it was being used and creating clear, measurable value. As part of that process, I went back and got some additional education and organization development and strategic human resources, and really started to focus my career on working hands-on with user audiences and the organizational side to make sure the technology was fully embraced and delivering full value, and developed a whole bunch of tools and techniques that were proved very effective. That sort of became the foundation and spirit for Tritons, which I founded in 2006, and we've been going strong ever since. Jen?
And hi everyone, I'm Jen Macklin-Rogan. I've been in the IT user adoption and customer success field for almost 20 years now. My educational background is in business administration and organizational development, and I've had the pleasure of working with a variety of companies and industries over the years, helping people understand how to identify and overcome the barriers and pitfalls that often get in the way of using technology and, more importantly, gaining value from technology.
So today we're going to talk about customer success managers and really the role that they also fill as software adoption coaches for the sake of making sure that they're onboarding customers faster and reducing churn. So we're really excited to be here, and one of the most critical functions that CSMs or customer success managers perform is really that proactively driving adoption within their customer's organization to make sure that the customer is rapidly achieving full value from the system, so that they use the system year over year and keep renewing.
And the challenge is, how do you proactively drive user adoption rapidly, effectively, and at scale? So during this webinar, we will share with you how to develop your customer success managers into confident, effective adoption coaches, and how to provide effective, scalable adoption coaching to all of your customers. Okay, so first we'll start with why your CSMs, customer success managers, need to be adoption coaches. Next, we'll cover what adoption coaches are and aren't. And lastly, we'll cover how you become an effective and valuable adoption coach. And just as a reminder, if you have any questions along the way, please type them into the chat area and we'll answer them at the end. Okay, so first, let's talk about why do CSMs need to be adoption coaches?
Okay, thank you. So, the big thing that we keep finding here is, customers purchase your product and they make that initial buying decision based on hope. They really are excited. They have a business problem they need to solve, and they think that your software will help them achieve a different business outcome. The features and benefits are important to them, but it's really their desire to solve a business goal and a challenge that they have that makes that decision. And so the initial decision is hope, and then they get in and experience your product, and then they actually start to say, did we get these outcomes? Did we realize the benefits we anticipated? Did we get where we needed to be? And if the answer is yes, they renew, and if they don't, they don't. So then quickly it becomes the renewal decision is actually based on their experience and based on reality. And the piece that we like to say is if they're not getting value from the use of your system, they're not going to renew.
And it's not just getting value or based on their experience with you and your products, but it's also you and your organization as a whole. So a lack of adoption is a core issue for software buyers. It's pretty much a universal core issue. If customers were adopting on their own, then there would be no customer churn and there wouldn't be a need for customer success. According to research, 50% of software paid for and licensed by organizations is not actually used. So think about this. If your customers only used 50% of your product, then how much value would they get out of your product? If you're having difficulty getting your customers to adopt your system, then you're not alone. This is a widespread and significant problem for SaaS vendors. And the challenge here is that not adopting software likely has more to do with your customer's organization than your product. For example, in your customer's organization, do their policies, processes, and priorities enable, support, and encourage use of your product? If not, then your product is likely not the problem, and no amount of system training on how to use your product can overcome your customer's inability to incorporate changes into their daily routines, which is why roughly 70% of IT implementations fail. So in effect, no adoption equals no value equals no renewals.
Very true. And oftentimes with clients, they bring us in at various points to help do lessons learned and best practice identification and help them identify how they can get more value in the year ahead. And typically when we run those sessions and we're working with them hands-on, what comes out of it is 90 to 95% of the issues they have are in no way, shape, or form related to the features and functions of the technology itself. It's all around the organizational issues of the process, the people, the leadership, the management, all of those pieces. And through our sessions with them, they have these big ahas of this is an organizational issue, it's not a system issue. So one of the big things that we find too is that customers want your help and they desperately need your help. They came to you to solve a business problem, and the first assumption that many organizations make is that the system will do that on its own and that it'll be so intuitive to use that people will just gravitate towards it, and that whole if you build it, they will come mentality. But when they get there, they realize, oh, what we actually need here is some services and some other pieces to help solve this problem. And providing adoption coaching and that guidance becomes that guidance and that mechanism by which you proactively guide your customer and accelerate adoption and the value that they receive from your software. So, without this coaching component and this coaching role, customers are left on their own for adoption, and it typically doesn't happen. So what we say now is without a coaching, you really don't get adoption, you don't get the value, you don't get renewal. So this really is just such a critical component of a customer success job. And like we say, your customers want your help, they need your help, and they recognize that because ultimately what they're on the hook for is solving their business problem, and that's really what they're trying to do. And any coaching that you can help give them in support of that is gratefully accepted and desperately needed. When we look with organizations and we try to help them figure out, well, how does this fit then within a customer success team? And we often have clients come to us and they say, we need to figure out how to structure our team. What are the activities they should be doing? What are the skills that they need? How do we develop a hiring profile for them? What we help them do is break down the roles and the functions that the customer success department often has to fulfill. And we've really distilled it down to two key roles, that account management, relationship management role, and then the adoption coaching guiding role. And when we look at that, what we see is the SaaS vendors we work with typically are very comfortable in more of the account management role. They get the idea of a concept behind a quarterly business review. They understand how to share a roadmap, and that you need to expand your accounts and help either providing some support to the customer or working with your support organization to get them what they need. And they understand those pieces because many of the people who have migrated to this role have done that for years in their previous careers. They're very excited. Where they seem to struggle is that driving adoption piece. And like, we know we need to do this, but how? Where do we start? What does that actually look like? And what's involved in that? So really this driving adoption piece, this coaching role, is all about active facilitation. It's about how do you get your customers to quickly move forward, to quickly start using your system, not just to get people onboarded, but to actually get that first point of value. And when we talk about adoption, we talk about it, are they using and incorporating the system into their daily work routines? Are they logging in on a daily basis? Are they not just using the system, but using it as designed? Because one of the challenges organizations find, and Jenny priced this a lot, is one department may use the system well, but they may do it in a way that prevents the other department from getting full value. Maybe they haven't put in all the data, maybe they haven't put in all the systems, or they do it late, or they do it in the incorrect manner, degrading the value from your software. So ultimately, this adoption coaching role is really meant to focus on that user behavior and business outcome piece from your client's perspective.
Okay, so now that we've talked at a high level why CSMs need to be adoption coaches, let's turn our focus to what adoption coaches are and aren't. So we often hear from CSMs say that they're hesitant to push their customers or to ask them for anything or, heaven forbid, task them with anything. They often say, I can't go in and tell a customer how to run their business, or I can't tell them to change their management philosophy. And this is absolutely true. You can't and you really shouldn't. Adoption can't be mandated. It needs to be guided. So as an adoption coach, it's important that you remember that you're not their boss. You can't force your customers to do anything. So you don't need to be demanding or overbearing. You're not an expert on their organization. And while you do need to challenge them to see new possibilities, they know more about their organization than you ever will. So you're not responsible for their outcomes. They own their business outcomes, both positive and negative. And you're not the decision maker. You provide guidance, options, tools, and recommendations, and ultimately they decide what they want to do in their organization. This means that you can only guide, educate, and influence adoption within your customer's organization by being proactive and helpful in driving adoption by your customers. Ask questions, listen, and guide them with good recommendations to keep them on the track to success. And when they get sidetracked or make mistakes or make decisions that unintentionally create barriers to adoption, and they will, you need to proactively reach out to them, help them course correct, and get them back on track. And remember, your customers want help, and by being an adoption coach, you're providing them a service they desperately need.
Right. And one of the things here too, you've got questions and recommendations. The strategic use of questioning and the way you engage in a coaching role for this type of work is very important, because part of what you're trying to do is create ahas for them and help them see new possibilities and alternatives, or to challenge some assumptions. And that's really one of the best techniques that there is out there. So let's talk a little bit too about how to embrace a coaching role, and really what are coaches and what are some of the different functions they provide to the clients and what does that need to look like. Coaches wear many hats, and typically when we're working with clients as we're going through the customer success training and we're going through the different roles and activities and responsibilities, many of the people there go, wow, I never thought of it this way. I didn't know how much is involved in here. So let's just go around, and really a big piece of it is you're meant to be a facilitator. You're actively guiding the organization and driving adoption within their own, or your customer within their own organization. You're a helper. You provide recommendations and you suggest actions, but again, they're the ones making the decisions. So this does come back to that idea that so many people have of, I can't tell someone what to do. I can't mandate to my customer what they need to do. You guide them and you provide them alternatives that they can't see on their own or that they don't know how to do on their own so that they can be more successful than they can on their own. Part of this role is being an educator and educating them on the user adoption process, not just on your system and your functionality. Many organizations, the people who are implementing technology have either never done this before or they've done some limited organizational change of some training and a little bit of communications, but they haven't done a full-scale adoption effort, and as a result, they haven't gotten the value that they need to get. So you've got to teach them what that process looks like and what the steps are, and influence them and get them to want to move forward on their own. One of the big pieces here is really being that accountability buddy. So many people in the clients that we've worked with, they really want to do a great job with their implementation. They really want to make sure that the system is successful and that they're successful. And then left to their own devices, they get busy, they get sidetracked, they have things come up. So being right there to help them stay focused, helping them attend a meeting to go over it or a check-in or giving them an activity or following up with them so that they're actually staying on top of it. I can't tell you how many times customers have come to us and say, wow, it was really helpful that you followed up and stayed on top of this. I never would have done that on my own, but I'm so glad I did. Which leads into as well that momentum driver, how to create that momentum and keep it going over the life of the system. And organizations get busy, people get busy, and you go through different cycles. There will be ebbs and flows in the momentum that's needed, but it's your job as the success and professional, as the customer, and as the coach to try and keep that momentum going so that things don't let up.
Help them achieve small wins along the way.
Right. One of our favorite questions we get from customers, which is always, when should we stop our adoption effort? And my answer is typically, well, when do you want to stop getting value from your IT investment? The adoption process is continuous to make sure that you go through over the long term, year after year. It changes, but it has to keep going. Some of the other roles of an adoption coach, challenger, and by that it's challenging assumptions, helping your client to recognize when they may have a blind spot and where they can't see a possibility that exists for them that can be more effective. Or as they say, well, we tried that last time, it didn't work. Well, tell me more about what that was, and let's talk about how this might be different and what you tried in the specifics, and here's some alternatives that might get you a better result.
It's also sort of highlighting for them the potential consequences of the actions they want to take or don't want to take but should.
Right.
And saying you can do that, but here's what you should expect to happen. And that becomes easier the longer you are a coach because you'll see the same things happening over and over again in different organizations.
Exactly, and that's so much of the pitfall preventer. One of the things that as a customer success professional, and you've probably already seen this in your own practice, as you work with multiple clients and over a long period of time, you get pretty good at spotting trends quickly or saying, well, this is an indicator that something's going to blow up a month from now, 6 months from now. How do I get ahead of this? And how do I present that information to my customer in a way that they are willing to hear it and consume it and take an alternative action based on it? All the time with our clients, we have a situation typically in the early stages and with the senior executives of we outline, here's typically what we see and here's some of the issues you can expect, and here's how we recommend handling it. And oftentimes the issue will come up, they will handle it a different way, they will encounter the negative outcome and they're like, you were right, what should we do next time? And sometimes people just need to experience it once or twice in a safe space before they'll really embrace some of your coaching and recommendations, but keeping in mind that it's always their decision. And then as you go through and really enable them to be more successful than they can on their own, ultimately part of your job as a coach, and this comes back to how many times we've encountered people in the training courses that we deliver or even in various conversations with other professionals where they're like, I can't tell my customer what to do or I don't know how to do that. Part of the role of an adoption coach is to create a hero amongst your customer within their organization. make them look so successful because they brought in your software, make them look so successful because they got everyone to adopt it in their organization, make them look so successful because they had clear demonstrated business value from the purchase and use of your software, that they look good, and of course they're going to renew and expand. And when you start to get in the mindset of, wow, my customers want to be a hero and I need to help them get there, it becomes very easy and exciting to become an adoption coach. And it's actually a lot of fun when you work with customers and you see them light up and say, wow, I didn't know I could do that, or wow, this is so much better than I thought it was. So if you've ever had that experience, you know just what a powerful thing it can be.
Okay, great. So now let's shift our focus to how you become an effective and valuable adoption coach for your customers. So there are 3 key abilities you need to be an effective and valuable coach. One is the ability to solve adoption problems from your customer's perspective. Second, you need the ability to deliver effective coaching. And third, you need the ability to tailor your coaching methods for various formats and groups. So let's take a look at the first one. To solve adoption problems from your customer's perspective, your customers need adoption training, tools, and methodologies. And remember, adoption is more about their organization than training them on how to use your product. And given that you are not an expert on their organization and how it operates, it can be a challenge to figure out how to help them, and typically they won't know how to help themselves. This means you will need to provide them the right combination of training, tools, methods, and playbooks that they can use within their organization to solve the root cause of adoption problems and drive adoption over the life of the system.
Right, and this is such a piece that we see all the time, is really remembering you're enabling their success. So many of the organizations with which we work, the individuals on the implementation team who are responsible for rolling out the system and making sure it's adopted, they've probably never done this before, or not to a size and scale. There's so much turnover in organizations and new people coming in and people changing roles and jobs. The norm in our client base is that the people have never done this before, or they've done a small piece in a different role, that they really don't feel confident in their ability. And getting them that knowledge and that training and the tools and templates and toolkits that they need is so essential to getting them in a position where they are even able to drive adoption if they choose to take the correct actions.
Right. And second, you need, as an adoption coach, your own adoption training tools and playbooks to know what actions to take and how to effectively guide your customers in driving adoption. For example, you need to understand the coaching process and how to initiate a coaching relationship, how to advance that relationship, and then how to sustain it. And Jason will talk about that in just a minute. But the last ability is to provide effective coaching in various formats. For example, you'll need to use different coaching methods with low, medium, and high-touch customers. And you'll need the ability to coach various groups in your customer organization. For example, the actions that you take to coach executives versus an implementation team versus managers and supervisors versus end users should be different, because these groups will have different goals, roles, responsibilities, and needs with regard to your product and how to incorporate that product into their daily routines.
Correct. And one of the things that is just a way to help clarify what this might look like too is when you go to and say, I've got to onboard a new customer and I need to establish a new coaching relationship with my executive sponsor, the project manager, whoever it may be, how would that look differently, and how would you structure that differently if the customer is a high-touch customer versus a low-touch customer? How do you do that if they really have purchased that premium service where you can spend a lot of time with them and it's a big project and big implementation? And we also find the gamut too of if a software is going to be a multi-year development and rollout, and those still happen. We've been working with a CRM rollout that's been multiple years now, versus a system that's going live in just a couple weeks or days. What are the activities that you might do differently? So when you think through how to structure these, no situation is exactly the same, and you've got to flex and adjust based on a variety of different parameters. So it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Absolutely. So one of the questions we often get asked is, when should the adoption coaching relationship begin? And the answer to that question is, coaching can and should occur in all phases of your relationship with existing customers, before, during, and after go live. But it should also be a part of with prospects before the sale is even made.
Right. When we look at this chart here and look at the investment and recovery period from your customer's perspective, when they first start out, when you're marketing to them during that initial sales cycle, they're trying to do a vendor selection. They're receiving information. They've got a team together. They're making a purchase decision. Then they're onboarding and developing a system. Then they're actually going live and onboarding the users and all those pieces. The whole way through this relationship, your customer's already spending money and investing in the sunk costs that they can never get back. And then there's no guarantee after you go live that people will use it, so you've got to quickly move them up that recover cost piece into the benefit stage. When we work with our enterprise customers, they make the assumption that adoption activities have to start at go live, when in fact many times they can start much earlier. And when we actually talk with the SaaS vendors and we're talking about customer success, as they have a very robust and effective coaching practice and coaching role where they can show that they are able to accelerate time to value for their customers, that becomes a sales differentiator for them. That becomes a competitive differentiator. So during the sales process, setting those expectations of here's how our organization can get you more value than our competitors, and here's how we can get it faster. And customer success services, especially if you're operating as a profit center, suddenly you have lowered your customer's risk. So if you can demonstrate an ability and a capability to do this and make them successful and to make them solve their business process, that goes in your favor. Similarly, as you're thinking about coaching relationships, starting early during the sales process, we're often told, hey, our salespeople want us to come in as a customer success team during the sales process to introduce ourselves, explain our role and our services, to help get the prospective client on board. Coming in early in the sales stage, you start to lay out the foundation for them of what is the coaching roles and responsibility, what are the levels of services, what we do, and more importantly, what we don't do. And you can set expectations for what your customer will need to be doing during this coaching process to get value and adoption within their own organization. So there's a lot of ways that you can start the coaching process even before the sale is complete, both so that when the sale does happen, you're ahead of the game, and then it will evolve from the point of sale to go live and beyond. So the relationship will change, but starting early gives you a lot of options and a lot of value to build those relationships and to move it forward.
Yeah, I think most SaaS vendors will tell potential customers that their success matters to them, but it's the SaaS vendor who can demonstrate and clearly explain how they will make them successful is the vendor that's going to get the sale.
Exactly, and when we've been doing this for over 10 years with clients and selling our professional services, they always ask us, so how do you do that? And if you have a good answer to that, you get the head nods and yeah, let's move forward and let's go quickly. I see the value here. If you don't have a good answer, that people give you the one eye kind of, not sure about that. So that's when coaching can take place at all stages. Let's talk a little bit about the coaching process and what this needs to look like. At a very high level, sort of just like with a romantic relationship, you start with, let's define the relationship and where's this going? What are we doing here? And during that define the relationship phase, and you start with that, and you may need to revisit that at different phases in your project with a client, that really is explaining the roles and responsibility of a coach and the coaching process and what you do. It explains that you guide them and provide recommendations, that you will occasionally challenge them. It explains that it's their job to take action, and you make some agreements about how you guys will actually hold each other accountable, and where as the client it's their choice to do or not do something, but they're looking for you as a resource and an expert. There's only so much you can do if they don't fulfill their end of the bargain. So you make some agreements about that and set some expectation. And then they realize that where is this going and what are the specific goals of the coaching relationship and what are the goals for that phase. So for example, during the sales process, your goals and the nature of the relationship will be different than once they've signed before they've gone live. Similarly, once you've gone live for that first year or two, what we tend to call the tactical adoption phase, the relationship will be different while you're trying to accelerate time to first value in your onboarding customers, and the activities that you do will be a little bit different than as opposed to someone who's been on the system for 2 or 3 years and now saying, how do we keep the system relevant? Or having staff turnover, how do we get new users onboarded to an existing system, all those different phases. So when you look at the end-to-end, your role will evolve, but you've got to have some agreements and clear understanding so that everyone's working together. Planning the journey, that really goes to what are the specific activities that you will do? What what is this? What are the steps that we take? How often do we meet? How do we meet? What are the deliverables? How do we know that this coaching is being effective? Getting some agreements on that is very important. And then finally, structuring the interactions is right in there as well too. And that's really coming through and saying, how do we do this? And a typical approach is, since you've got to educate your customer, make sure that they have the knowledge of driving adoption, that they have the tools and playbooks and the materials that they need, you need to provide that to your customers in some form or fashion. And again, this may vary for low, medium, and high touch customers. It may vary for how much you want to have standard materials versus something very specific to your solution or solutions. But there's got to be something there where you help guide them through the process as a coachee. There'll be issues around frequency and how you conduct your sessions, if they're in person or remote, if they're group sessions or individual sessions. Really working through what is some of the content, what are the things we actually discuss and do during this coaching activities, and how will we track our progress and measure our outcomes. And then how do we hold each other accountable and report back? And who should have access to this? Is it just to us as individuals? Is it to our teams, to our executives? How does this factor in to make sure that the organization is getting the value they want from their software investment? A lot of ways that you can do that, and different levels of intensity involved in that and complexity, and it depends on the needs of your organization. If your client is a very small organization with pretty simplistic needs, it can be a very fast, easy process. If it's more bespoke and individualized and all that, it's a little more complicated.
And again, none of this is a technology issue. These are people and organizational issues. Okay, so Jason, we've talked a couple of times about providing your customers playbooks. Why is that so important, and how do you go about doing that?
This is a question we get asked all the time. So if you're a customer success professional, put yourself in the mind of a customer that's just starting their relationship with your organization, especially if it's a big investment. And if this professional, maybe they're mid-career or early in their career, if they've never done this before, what are the questions they're going to have? What is the level of uncertainty that they will have? Where are they going to be anxious and just not clear what to do? One of the first things you need to do as a coach is guide them through and give them confidence that following the process that you lay out will make them successful. So when you give them playbooks, when you give them some training on how to drive adoption within their organization, how to measure results, how to be effective, it gives them some confidence. So one of the first things you do is you give them those playbooks and tools that they need, and then you make sure that you have corresponding playbooks and tools of your own on how to coach that material. And this makes sure you guys are both singing from the same sheet of music, and that you both know what's next in the process, you both know how this works and where this goes. And this allows you to structure your journey and make it easier for your customer. It also, as a customer success professional, having standard playbooks that your clients will follow and that your customer success team will follow makes it much more scalable and efficient and effective, so that other CS staff members can fulfill this coaching role, or third parties can fulfill the coaching role, whatever it needs to be, but people understand the process that you need to go through. And it also makes it easier to spot where there's going to be challenges or issues from customers as you work with different groups and say, oh, these 5 other customers are having an issue here, there's something we need to do. And it enables you to really embrace best practices and take those to your customers. So it's not just a common practice, it's really, this is what's most effective, let's stay focused. So we do talk about using a variety of different tools and different media when working with different clients, and this can take a lot of different forms, and you've got a lot of different flavors for this. So when we look at low-touch customers, there's typically some version of how do we make this available electronically, how do we enable their self-service. It can be a combination of push and pull and sending messages and alerts and triggers and things like that, as well as working offline. As you move up the scale and you've got medium touch customers where they need a little bit more hand-holding, maybe especially if you're working in a for-profit customer success team and you're charging for your service, they may need some higher interactions and personalization, but not the full-scale white glove treatment of a high-touch customer that's got fully personalized way to go. So when you start to look at this, you say, how do we develop our playbooks and tools such that we can give a certain amount to everyone? It becomes that foundational element. And for those low-touch customers, this may be all they need, and they get to go and they can run with this tool and solve a lot of their issues and problems and be able to get a boost in adoption in their organization and get better ROI from their investment than they can on their own. And from a low-touch customer, that may be all that either you can afford to give them based on the profitability of your organization, or really all that they need. As you move up, there's typically some sort of interactions of how you might do group activities for medium-touch customers. How do you use effectively communities of practices? Many organizations and software vendors also look at having their user group meetings that they may do in person, they may do a big annual conference, they may do local user groups as well too. How do you use some of those venues to engage people differently, higher touch than just electronic and automation, but still not a full high-scale, high-touch engagement? And then how do you build on that as well too for your higher touch customers that have really specific needs and that need that white glove service? So when we look at all of this, there are a lot of options out there, and trying to figure out how you can use all available electronic media and in-person media effectively for low touch and high touch, such that everything builds on each other, is absolutely critical, because that's what gives you speed and scale. One of the things that we often get asked by customers then is, so we've got these needs, and where do we need? How do we meet these needs? Because we've never done this before. We don't really know where we're going. How do we build it quickly and scalable? And we don't always have the adoption expertise in-house to be able to do this effectively. What do we do? Which, excuse me, leads to one of the approaches that Tritons has taken, and I want to share this with everyone so that you can, if this is something that's useful for you, you have some understandings of some options that you have, as well as, if not, it might be a model to help you figure out some options for how you can build out your own playbooks and tools that would work across client groups, media. We routinely have been asked, okay, so we understand the need for this. We don't really know how to do it. We've got to move very, very quickly, and we can't afford the time and effort to get it wrong, or we can't afford the time and effort to do this ourselves while doing our day job that we already have. What do we do? And Tritons recently developed our own online adoption playbooks and toolkits and training and materials that are intended for use by both customers buying or software, as well as customer success teams that are selling into their customers, to enable this coaching process to go much faster. What we have really done is taken our 10 years of best practices and deliverables that we've used so successfully with our clients, and we've sort of flipped the model. And we said, how do we take and make these available electronically via our portal? How do we adjust the content to be relevant to someone who's never done this before? And then how do we go through and enable them to have their own self-service? And then how do we use this for those organizations that need medium and high-touch services, that this becomes a foundational element to allow them to move faster and cheaper than ever before? And it really is quite fantastic the way we've been able to do this. What we've basically done is taken our materials that have proven so valuable and effective and put them into an online portal that enables self-service as a foundation, but then can be customized and tailored both in terms of content available to a specific solution, but also as well as the interactions and elements that we use. And we can use our AdopTech portal to train customers on customer success, train them on adoption, engage them more thoroughly and remotely than ever possible before, and really keep people engaged and interactive all over time. And it's just a different way of approaching this, as opposed to, I just need to send emails, I just need to hold a conference call, I just need a user group. Thinking through all the modern channels that we have available to us to engage across the entire organization so much differently. With a lot of organizations, when they see what's possible, it really opens up new possibilities to how they can approach their coaching needs and challenges, and it makes it so much easier for their organizations to adopt it. You know, a quick client story, we recently were doing a project with a very large organization that was doing a nationwide rollout of a CRM, and they were, before we had AdopTech, it was very time-consuming and multi-year rollout to build this adoption capability across their entire organization so that they can roll out their system to all 50 states. And the amount of effort to even just get everyone together as a team from all the states to get them all educated about the adoption process, very time-consuming and expensive for the client. Had we had the AdopTech tool back then, it really would have dramatically lowered that time and cost to do that, enabling customers to go faster and cheaper.
And we're so excited for you to try AdopTech and get the adoption solutions that you need to quickly and effectively develop your coaching expertise. That we're giving our listeners today a 40% discount on any one of our online customer success courses. So after this webinar, or within the next 24 hours, we'll send you a URL and a discount code via email. If you don't get the email, just please reach out to us at info@tritons.com. And if you attend an AdopTech demo, either a private demo or one of our public demos that we have once a week, then we'll enter you into a chance to win 3 months of free access to AdopTech.
Right. Yeah. And that free access would include the online training for customer success professionals, as well as the user adoption training and access that you can share with your customers to enable them to be more effectively coached and to educate them about the adoption process. So very excited about that, and we hope you will take us up on that offer and want to share more information about that later. But we didn't want to go too far here. We wanted to leave plenty of time for questions because there usually are quite a few that come up. So with that said, just if you would like more information about Tritons and coaching and adoption, very happy to get on a phone call and share that with you. And we also have a few questions here, and if you have additional questions, please go ahead and enter them now. I'm just trying to access the questions here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason and Jen. That was an awesome presentation. Thanks for all of your wealth of knowledge and sharing it with us. So just to remind everyone, we will be sending the slides and the recording, so it's okay if you can take notes on everything, and you'll be able to share with your colleagues and your team and anyone you know in the customer success space as well. So yeah, I do see that we have questions. So Jason, can you see the questions panel and all the questions right there?
I'm having a little technical issue here accessing the questions that are there.
That's okay. I can. I'm happy to read them for you, and maybe you can just go ahead and answer them. Does that work?
That'd be great.
Awesome. So Jade right here was asking, in our company we have 2 different teams, one in charge of driving adoption and making the first value delivered, and then the other team is responsible for managing the account health after. Do you think that one person should be doing both?
We get this question a lot too. I think the answer, obviously, it depends on the organization. What I tend to look for are what are the skills and attributes of who would be effective in the 2 separate roles. And if one person has the skills and the attributes to be successful, to coach people effectively, as well as to manage that account, it can definitely be a viable opportunity to staff people in that role. More often than not, what we found is that people tend to gravitate towards one or the other roles and would prefer to focus there. And if your organization is at the size that you can have specialists who are better in that realm, I say let people go to where their natural strengths are for the most part.
I think it's important that if there are 2 teams doing those different roles, making sure that there's a lot of collaboration and communication among those 2 teams so that you can share the data and the feedback that you're getting customers and use that, leverage that data to provide them better services or better product.
Awesome. We have a next question right here from Laurel, asking, is there an occasion for a low-touch method like electronic self-training for introductory topics for high-touch customers, so that every meeting that you do have with those customers is getting them that much more prepped and savvy on the product?
Oh, absolutely. We're a big fan of really taking a blended approach wherever possible, and some of this will depend as well of if it's a low-touch, medium touch, or high-touch customer. When we go through and envision our engagements and activities with a client, we go through and say, where does it make more sense for someone to have a low-touch mechanism? And sometimes let us give them information and let them start first, and then we can build on that when we do get together in our interactions, making it a more effective use of time and also enabling people to get exposed to materials and ideas in advance so they have time to think about things and time to put together questions very effectively.
Right, I think that's where a lot of the value in AdopTech is having those online training courses that your customers can take to get a little bit smarter. And then when you have conversations and interactions with them, you have a better shared understanding and a shared language that you can use. So you really do save a lot of time. You can move much faster once you guys are all on the same page, at least on a foundational level. So I do think training is really important.
Awesome. Here we have Sarah is asking to learn your top strategies for involving additional non-core team members and getting their buy-in. So particularly those who weren't exposed or involved in the sales cycle.
Great question. When we designed, using AdopTech as a reference, when we designed that, we recognized that so much of adoption requires every user in the organization to understand not just how to point-and-click navigate a system, but how their job impacts everyone else's job. And there's a certain amount of information that everyone needs to be available, but they need it at different times, and they need it in different ways. So initially what we try to do is start with who are the implementation team members that need to go through and drive adoption within their organization and get them fully aware of the steps and processes and challenges about driving adoption or an adoption program at an organizational level. And then how to really work, how either they or you as the customer success manager need to work with executives in their organization, frontline managers and supervisors, and the end users. And you need to engage each of those different audiences in different ways and at different times. The AdopTech approach that we put together says, how do we have playbooks for each of those user groups, the implementation team members, executives, managers, and end users, to help get them to use the system fully and effectively in their role in their organization. Similarly to that, what a lot of people don't realize, and we talk about this in other issues, is that the single biggest driver of adoption tends to be the end user's immediate supervisor or manager. And many times those managers and supervisors don't even know that this is part of their role, and they don't know what are the steps they need to take to effectively drive adoption within their own teams, and what are the tools that they need. So part of the playbook could be, how do you, as a software vendor, work with your customer's implementation team to get them aware that their managers need to drive adoption in their organization and that they need to enable their managers. So every so often it is working down the chain to make sure everyone has what they need.
And your playbooks and tools also need to accommodate people that are coming in and out of the organization, either through turnover or promotions. You don't want to have to take 10 steps back every time someone new joins your customer's team, right? So having information or a place that they can go to get the information, to get up to speed, and to be able to be a valuable team member is really important.
That's so true. We actually get a lot of requests from the clients that are buying technology say, hey, we've got two needs. The first one is we need to get the system up and running and accelerate initial adoption and value creation. And then 3 years down the road, they're like, we've got a lot of turnover. We did an acquisition. We have something going on. The system's still live and it's fine and it's stable now, but we've got all these new bodies coming in. How do we get them quickly using it effectively as well, too? Because as new people come in, if they're not effectively onboarding on how to adopt the system in a way that helps the whole organization, over time that effective usage decreases and the ROI decreases. So there's that activity around the new joiners that need to be addressed.
Awesome. We have another great question here from Rachel. How do you use data to enable successful coaching?
How do you use data for effective coaching?
Yeah, to enable successful coaching.
There's a lot of different ways. Part of an effective coaching mechanism and model is to really understand that two-way engagement of what's being done and what's not, to understand who's using, what's the impact of coaching, who's using your system, are they following through on activities, are they delayed, where are they not going, where are things not happening that were agreed, and under what sort of speed and frequency. The more data points that you have, they allow you to structure your coaching mechanisms and interactions differently. So if people are not following through, there may be an escalation that's needed. If you say, hey, people have, what I thought would take 3 weeks, everyone's already done, I need to recalibrate, where do we need to go? I think there's a lot of opportunities around using data to understand what's actually happening. And in fact, one of the things with the AdopTech piece is using the reporting, the capabilities in that system to get insight into what sort of actions or activities are going, and possibly integrating those with great systems like Amity to build that rich picture about what are your customers doing. I think systems that show you what are their interactions with your software are very important. Being able to layer in what are their actions in terms of learning about adoption or following through in adoption activities or taking adoption plans and putting them into action, that's equally critical to say, who's actually doing this and who's disengaging from the process even before they get to the software.
And I think that's where an adoption coach can be really helpful in setting some user adoption targets that people can work towards and hopefully achieve, small wins along the way. But if they don't achieve those targets, then you have a really good opportunity to talk to the customer about what barriers might be at play that are keeping people from meeting those targets. So using that data to advance your relationship with your customer and help them be successful with your product.
Very true. You know, when I look at systems like Amity that have such a great analytic capability and can take actions based on certain triggers and automate, you know, the question sort of becomes, well, okay, we've got an insight and we've got a trigger. What is that activity that should get triggered? Should it be an email? Should it be a task? Should it be something that the customer should be doing, or should it be the adoption coach that should be doing something? Mm-hmm. And what does that need to look like? So I think that blending of automation and information and knowledge really comes into the, okay, this is how we build a successful practice and program.
Awesome, thank you. So we do have another question here. Someone is asking for a little bit of a clarification about what you mean by adoption. Does that mean that someone should know how to use all the tool features? And how does adoption relate to onboarding?
When we look at it, is the adoption is, are people effectively using the system as part of their day-to-day workflow and business as designed and as intended by whoever configured and calibrated your system to achieve that business outcome that they want? So for example, with a CRM, are people entering the activities and the contacts and all the account information? Are they doing it by the right time frame, whether that's in real time or by the end of the week or whatever it may be? Are they following the steps and processes that they need so that other people can use that same data, or so that the automatic triggers are done? And are you actually getting that business outcome that you need? Have you solved your business problem? There may be a lot of modules that the system may have that any given end user will never need to know or would never do. And in those cases, it's not all about understanding the full system load, feature load. It's about, am I doing my job effectively using the system as designed and intended?
And we often talk about adoption in terms of behavior. So it's helping drive the behaviors that people need to start doing to be effective with the software and get value from it. For example, I'm thinking back to one of our clients who implemented a system, and the folks that we had talked to, the stakeholders, were still using their own private spreadsheets, mm-hmm. that they weren't using the system to collect and store data, but they were still holding on to their, well, this is the way I've always done it, this is the way I'm going to continue to do it, which really had a strong impact on whether or not the other people in their organization would use the system, because if there's bad data in the system, they're not going to use it. There's no mm-hmm. real value there. So when thinking about adoption, you need to be thinking less about the features and functionality of the system and more about what are the behaviors that the end users need to stop doing that they're currently doing, and what do they need to learn to do or start doing.
Right. And I think that becomes so critical when you're using a collaboration tool. So for example, Office 365 or SharePoint or one of those, there's a lot of functionality where people by habit may just say, you know, I'll just email this document around, as opposed to I will put this email out on the shared drive and email a link to it so that we have one common reference point that everyone can access the latest version and can see changes in real time. It's a very, very simple adoption component. Like, instead of attaching an email, I attach a link. It's a huge behavior change for a lot of people, and to recognize how that needs to work. And there's a lot of steps and activities that you need to take and that your managers need to take and executives need to take to make sure that that effectively happens. Otherwise, you know, system's there and it's got the functionality, but it's not delivering the business value.
And there was a second part to that question. How does adoption relate to onboarding?
Oh, very good point. You know, there's a lot of different ways to answer that, and I'm not sure exactly what it is you're trying to get to. When we look at driving adoption within an organization, we look at different phases of there, like what happens before go live. And many times there are ways you can start changing those behaviors, those work processes, those work practices and habits before systems go live, if there are components of it that you can decouple from the technology go live. Then there's that initial piece of, so there's the, you know, introducing the software to the organization and then introducing end users at go live are not the same thing. Then there's the piece of, okay, we've got a new tool out there. How quickly do we get everyone using it consistently, using it effectively to get the business outcomes that we want? And that really is that time to first value. And how do we make sure that happens very quickly? One of the things that is amazing every time we encounter this, but it comes up all the time, is, sure, they trained me on the system. I know how to point and click. I sat in the room and I did all this stuff, and I took 2 days away from my office, which was great. And then I got back there, but then we went live. No one ever actually asked me to use it. no one said, oh, from this point forward, you need to put it here. And if I forgot, or if it was a new process or things got updated, no one came back and said, oh, you've been doing it wrong for 3 months. Can you do it this way instead? So many of our users tell us when we interview them, I'm happy to use it. Just tell me what you want and I'll do it. But no one's ever asked me. No one's never made it specific. And so much of this is that adoption planning is making it explicit to the point that an end user can say, yeah, I did what I was asked. So I created 10 records by Friday. I went and updated all of this information. I stopped using email and I started putting it here for every single document. Whatever it may be, I used the meta tagging correctly on my data to make sure that it would be easily accessible by others. When you can make those steps very explicit, it makes it so much easier for end users to adopt it and make them, smart goals, the time-bound, specific, measurable. Did they achieve it, yes or no? And if not, you get to go investigate why, because it may not be their fault. There could be things that prevented them. Something
out of their control. But it does help to make it easy for them to know what the expectations are of them. And sometimes that seems really obvious, but a lot of times it's missed. And I think that goes back to your point about managers and supervisors are really important in that, and making sure that their team members are very clear and aware of what the expectations are and how you're going to help them get there.
Very true.
Fantastic, great. Another question, Jennifer is saying that her company currently does not charge for training programs when bringing clients onto the platform. And she's asking, can you talk a little bit about the balance between ensuring clients use our system fully and the profitability of a training program?
Yeah, that's one of those, the answer is it all depends. From our perspective, customer success is more than just training, but it should be a profitable service because you are providing a professional service that customers desperately need in order to get value out of your system that they're not able to deliver on their own. The question becomes, how do you charge from that in a way that customers can understand it and are willing to purchase it? Many organizations are used to, I'm buying a software, I need to buy training, or I need to buy X for it. And some organizations will charge that as a separate line item. Others will say, we want to make this transparent to our customer. We will figure out what those fees and revenues should be, and we will incorporate that into the per user license cost or whatever it may be, and just incorporate in there so it's not a separate line item on an invoice to a customer. But ultimately, we are charging for the customer just in a different mechanism. The specifics around how and when and why you do that will vary. And again, if you're a customer where it's a $9 a month license fee is very different than if it's $200 fee. There's a lot of different variations depending on your organization.
And I think it's important to always ask yourself the question, is the cost of providing this customer success service worth the value of the customer to your organization? So making sure that, for your higher revenue customers, you're going to probably provide more customer success services, and they will probably be willing to pay for that as well. I think we read some statistic recently that 20% of your customers will be 80% of your revenue. So making sure that you're tailoring your customer success services and how you're charging for that based on the revenue and the value of your customers.
Mm-hmm. And another piece to that as well is when you're doing effective coaching and proactively engaging your customer, looking at the feedback that you get from your customers, whether it's from surveys or looking through what are the support requests they're putting in, the nature of those problems, and trying to figure out how do we get ahead of this? How do we prevent these problems so that we keep seeing reoccurring? There's a lot of pieces of it and a lot of opportunities that may not be training that would allow you to engage your customers and solve their problems in a way that is good for everyone.
Awesome. So after an adoption event, what are the typical time periods when you would want to be checking back in with the customer and to see how effective the adoption has been?
That is a very good question, and I think that comes back to it would be different based on your tier of low, medium, and high touch. When we've gone through with some clients that were a higher touch client, they were every week doing some version of a check-in with their user teams initially during that critical go-live period, and their goal was to quickly accelerate effective use and adoption. And then as the effective use stabilized and they worked out the kinks in the system, those check-ins degraded over time. So it went from every week to every 3 weeks to every 3 months, all the way through. So you will go through different phases with your customer as well. And I think The frequency of the check-in will depend on the size of the customer and the value and importance they get, as well as their plan. And others.
The complexity
yeah.
of their organization.
And also the mechanism by which you do that check-in may vary. So some of that may be using data from the system. So we had the question on how do you use data. You can come up with metrics for logins, for whatever, that may give you some good insight into what's happening. You can do surveys, you can do phone calls, you can do user groups, you can do hands-on facilitation. There are many, many techniques to get that information that you need and then to figure out how best to use it to proactively guide your customer towards improvement.
Great. So it is 2. Do you want to answer one last question before we wrap up?
That'd be great.
Sure.
Awesome. So in regards to coaching, how would you recommend approaching a client who has had ample time to complete a task but have delayed, and now their implementation is delayed based on their inaction?
So how would you, let me just repeat back to make sure I've got this. How would you approach a client that's had plenty of time to complete an activity that you all agreed to and they didn't, and now the implementation is delayed?
Yeah. So what should you do?
That comes up surprisingly frequently too. It depends on the relationship that you have with the client and what's going on. Sometimes what is good is to come back and actually ask some clarifying questions. Here's an observation. Let's talk about what's going on, your side, our side, and what we can do to solve this. But also, this is sometimes if it truly is that their side hasn't delivered what they had agreed to and your side has, then you have to fall into that accountability mode and just not accusatorily, but just directly say, we have made some agreements here. It doesn't look like you've done them. Is there something I'm misunderstanding? How do we get this back on track?
Yeah. How do I help you move forward with it? It also could be a good red flag of some adoption barriers that are enterprise-wide in that organization that could affect or impact adoption of your product. So, look out for those things, listen for those things, because that's important data if they're not holding up their end of the bargain and being successful.
Right. And the other point to that is, who is it that made these commitments that didn't follow through with them? Because if there's an escalation path, they may be an implementation project manager, they may be a technical person, they may be someone else involved in the team that didn't deliver, and you have an escalation path up to an executive. If they are the executive, that's a different conversation. And I've encountered both situations. It's a ginger piece, but I think that's also part of the where you need to figure out what is the line between adoption coaching versus account management and relationship management, because in some situations there's also a contractual component and a dollar amount based on timeframes and delays and things like that. So it's never a clear-cut answer. So fortunately, a lot of it depends in there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I think it's past 2 now, so we should wrap up. But if Jen and Jason didn't get to answer your question, sorry about that, but also feel free to get in touch with them directly. I'm sure they'd be really happy to answer your questions.
Absolutely. We love talking with people. Very happy to share information and ideas. Just info@tritons.com, or come to our website and contact us as well too. And we're very happy to respond back as well as quickly as we can.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. We really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for being here, and thanks for all of your questions. And Jen and Jason, thank you so much for that presentation. It was great having you, as always. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thanks, Matilda.
Have an awesome day, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye now.